The number one question I receive from No Man's Land players: what traits do you like on your weapons or survivors? Weapon and survivor traits are crucial when it comes to gameplay. Depending on them, you can go further up in levels or rounds in challenges. Armor traits are also important on the survivability of your team. Without certain armor traits, the likelihood of success at higher levels would be increasingly difficult and sometimes impossible. I know what traits I'm looking for, but that does not mean I have them. The players and fans who have seen my video ask me what survivors I use and what weapons I have chosen for them. I will be discussing the 4 grieving stages of my challenge cycle. Depending on these stages, I will use certain survivor classes and certain gear. First off, let me clarify certain terms I may be using for this video. Kiting. Kiting is when you play cat and mouse with a walker and you lead them around the given area without letting them hit you. AoE. AoE stands for Area of Effect. It is a term mostly used for online gaming and it means hitting multiple targets at the same time. For example, assaults, warriors, and hunters perform AoE attacks. Depending on the challenge map, there are 4 stages that I have divided into categories that will require a certain team makeup. First stage is what I call the grind. Grinding stage occurs from the starting level up until the level where you can easily pass a map without much redos. In my case, it will be from round 15 to 24. For the grind stage, I use 2 assaults and 1 hunter. The assaults have both widespread and the hunter will have large caliber. You don't really need this exact team, but I find it the easiest to grind with when I use this team makeup. Second stage I call the OCD stage. In this stage, you may develop some sort of obsessive-compulsive disorder that will be inclined to redo missions until you get those perfect 3 stars to advance to the next round. In my case, it will be round 25 and 26. This stage takes the longest for me to accomplish since I have to constantly replay missions to get that perfect 18 stars at the end before progressing. For this stage, and if the challenge requires AoE, I will use Abraham Ford for his leader trait, 1 extra assault, and 1 strong hunter. The hunter will have large caliber and lethal on his weapon, and the assaults will have widespread and lethal as well. For armor, I prefer to have iron skin and either stun resist or dodge depending on if that map has heavy walkers or armored walkers roaming around. The goal in this stage is to stay above the bruised level, so the armor you select is very important. Getting hit once from a walker should be okay. If the challenge requires mostly single targeting, I will use 2 hunters and 1 shooter. I use my best long-distance range team if some kiting is involved. For example, in this video for challenge Big Boss Man, it required some distance from the heavy walker. For this reason, I use 2 hunters with piercing and interrupt. Interrupt will still work until the walkers are 5 levels above your survivor level. So for maxed out 21 survivors, you should be able to interrupt walkers at level 26. My shooter will have high-powered and piercing. In this video, you can see how my shooter just killed a level 28 walker in 1 shot. For armor, the most important trait is Iron Skin to absorb damage and dodge. Stun resist is helpful if you're dealing with heavy walkers. The goal here is to minimize damage to get those 3 stars. If the map looks as if the walkers have enough space between them, I will use 1 warrior and 2 scouts. Scouts and warriors can take out high-level walkers in 1 turn. If you use scouts with threat reduction on their weapon, you should be able to clean out a whole area of walkers without getting new spawns. For example, Sunday Traffic in the Ghost Town challenge map is a great example of how to use melee to get your 3 stars. If you have a pretty pimped up Jesus hero, you can use his leader trait to demolish the walkers. The third grieving stage is what I call the I don't give a f stage. For me, this stage occurs on round 27. In this stage, you will most likely not get that perfect 3 stars in each map, but you want to get as many stars as possible before advancing. It is very possible to still 3-star each map, but I find that around level 27 tier 2, I will lose a star or 2 and I don't really give a shit about my OCD at this point. For this stage, if the map requires a lot of AoE, I will use Sasha and 2 assaults. The 2 assaults must have widespread and lucky. The lucky trait will help proc Sasha's leader trait, since at this level, you will most likely be getting a ton of body shots. The more body shots you trigger, the better the chances you will get a charge point. Piercing trait will negate the chances of getting body shots, so you may not want to include that in your weapon. For armor, I will normally use Iron Skin and Dodge. Dodge may still kick in if you have some survivors with pink stars. You just need to get through the first punch and then you should be able to continually stun the walkers. If the map requires mostly single targeting, I will use my strongest hunter and 2 shooters for a map with heavy walkers. The hunter will normally have piercing and lucky on his weapon, but since I have to use what I have, I make sure he has piercing and lethal. Lucky would stack with piercing, so if you get a weapon with lucky and piercing, upgrade it quickly. For shooters, I make sure they have high-powered and piercing on their weapon. If the map has walkers that are spread out, I will normally use my melee team. Just use your best melee team, but make sure you bring a scout for their threat reduction. You should always finish off a walker with the scout. My warrior's weapon will usually have wide arc and lucky. The reason I use lucky is because you are basically face to face with the walker. If there is a chance you can't kill a walker in one turn, you will want your dodge to kick in. Dodge and lucky will still stack. Wide arc helps when there are multiple walkers standing near each other. For scouts, I make sure they have threat reduction and swift strike on their weapon. That extra action point can save your life. For melee armor, I prefer dodge and iron skin. Stun resist will help against heavy walkers. The last grieving stage is what I call trucking through. For me, this stage is anything on round 28 and above. In this stage, I just want to get at least 1 star in each map so I can get those extra bonus stars when advancing to the next level. For this specific stage, I will use the exact same team for the same scenarios as stage 3. The only difference is I will make sure all my survivors have the wrestler trait on their armor. The wrestler trait gives you 1 chance to escape. This is the most crucial trait for this particular stage. This can mean the difference between 200 to 300 stars added to your weekly challenge star count. As you can see in this video, you get 1 extra chance to break free from your walker's grip to reach the exit. It can also give you that 1 needed chance for your assaults to build up their initial stun charge for AoE maps such as our most recent challenge, SWAT, and Armored Compound. Now let's talk about survivor traits. What do I look for? Because I have built up my survivors before NG kept changing shit around, I normally looked for certain traits which I still feel are useful today. Dodge, bullet dodge, and lucky are still important on my survivors. Although dodge was nerfed, they are very important to the survivability of my team up to level 26. As you can see here, my survivor just dodged an attack from a level 26 armored walker. Lucky trait will stack with important traits such as wrestler, stun resist, interrupt, and piercing, so I believe it is better to have it than not. The other 2 traits I tend to look for on survivors are marksman for ranged and strong for melee. The increase in damage will carry you to higher levels, especially with the leader trait help from Abraham for ranged and Jesus for melee. The last trait I normally look for is either Sure Shot or Vigilant for ranged and Defensive Stance or Power Strike for melee. The reason being, Sure Shot and Vigilant is a great damage boost for ranged, and since they are already far apart from their enemies, you can help trigger these traits most of the time without getting hit. Ranged are also a bit more squishier than melee, so I prefer making my offense strong. For melee, they can sometimes act like tanks. You are face to face with the enemy, so you want as many defensive moves as possible. I hope this video gave you some input on what survivors and gear I choose for my 4 grieving stages. Please hit thumbs up if you want to see more of these videos in the future. Thank you for watching, and let's fight to survive.